Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Connecting Life podcast. I'm your host, dianaboskma. In here, we connect the dots between health, nutrition, mindset, and everyday life, helping you build a healthier, more fulfilling future, one step at a time. So, for today, grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's episode. So, have you ever looked at the scales during menopause and wondered whether your body has suddenly stopped cooperating? What if I told you that some of the changes you're experiencing may actually be part of your body's attempt to adapt and protect you? Today we're going to explore what may really be happening beneath the surface. So, we're going to be talking about a topic that affects millions of women and yet often leaves many feeling confused, frustrated, and sometimes even betrayed by their own bodies. And we're talking about menopause and weight gain. Perhaps you've noticed that your clothes fit differently than they used to. Or maybe you stepped on the scales and wondered how the numbers could possibly be increasing when you're eating the same foods you've always eaten. Perhaps you've looked in the mirror and realized that even if your weight hasn't changed very much, your body shape certainly has. For many women, this can be very frustrating. I've spoken with women who say things like, "I don't recognize my body anymore. I used to be able to lose weight so easily. I feel like my body has turned against me." And these are just a few of the comments that I've heard. And if you ever felt that way, you're certainly not alone. So today, I'd like to offer a different perspective. What if your body isn't working against you? What if some of these changes are actually part of your body's attempt to adapt to a completely new stage in your life? That doesn't mean every aspect of menopause or weight gain is beneficial, nor does it mean we should ignore our health. But perhaps understanding what is happening can replace some of the frustration with curiosity. And maybe even a little compassion. Because the female body is remarkable, even when it feels inconvenient and even when it doesn't behave the way we'd like it to. And also, even when it seems to be changing without our permission. The body is trying to survive, always trying to adapt, always trying to maintain balance. And menopause is no exception. So let's begin by looking at what actually changes during menopause. Menopause marks the end of a woman's reproductive years, and that's a natural transition rather than a disease. Unfortunately, many women are taught to view menopause as something that has gone wrong. In reality, it's a new chapter. During this transition, levels of estrogen and progesterone gradually decline, and these hormones influence far more than just your reproduction. They affect metabolism, they affect fat storage, they affect sleep, they affect appetite, they affect muscle mass, and they affect bone density. And then they even affect how your body responds to stress. So when these hormones begin to shift, your body has to adjust. Imagine moving into a completely new house. The furniture that worked perfectly in your previous home may no longer fit in the same places. You may need to rearrange things. You may need to create new routines. And you may need to adapt. That's very similar to what your body is doing during menopause. The hormonal environment changes and the body begins reorganizing itself around that new reality, and this can feel quite uncomfortable. But it is not necessarily a sign that your body is failing. One of the questions I like to ask is this: instead of asking, "Why is my body doing this to me?" what if we would ask, "What is my body trying to achieve?" And just changing that perspective with that simple question, that single simple question, can change everything, because it changes your perspective. And, throughout nature, living organisms generally don't waste energy doing things without a purpose. And your body is constantly adapting to help us survive. And when we look at menopausal weight gain through that lens, some fascinating possibilities come about. So let's start with energy reserves. For most of human history, food was not guaranteed. Today, many of us live within walking distance of a supermarket. We have refrigerators, freezers, and cupboards full of food. But for thousands of years, that wasn't the case. There were failed harvests, harsh winters, illnesses, periods of scarcity. And during those times, body fat served as a critical survival mechanism. Fat is stored energy. In fact, it's one of the most efficient forms of energy storage the body has. When food becomes scarce, those reserves can be used. Now, does that mean your body knows whether you're living in a modern, in my case, British town with 3 supermarkets nearby? Well, no, not really. How's your body going to know? Your biology was largely shaped in a world where scarcity was common. So your body still operates using many of the same ancient survival mechanisms. And from that perspective, storing a little extra energy during a period of significant hormonal transition may not be entirely irrational. It's your body's way of saying, let's make sure we have enough reserves available while we're adapting to these changes. And again, that doesn't mean unlimited weight gain is beneficial. What it does suggest is that there may be more going on than simply eating too much and exercising too little. The story becomes even more interesting when we look at bone health. One of the biggest concerns after menopause is the increased risk of osteoporosis. Estrogen plays a significant role in maintaining healthy bones. As estrogen levels decline, bone loss can accelerate. This is one reason why fractures become more common in older women. But here's something many people don't know. Fat tissue isn't just passive storage. It isn't simply sitting there doing nothing. Fat tissue is metabolically active. One of the things fat tissue can do is produce small amounts of estrogen through a process involving an enzyme called aromatase. Now, let's be clear. This doesn't replace the amount of estrogen the ovaries produced before menopause, not even close. But it may provide a modest amount of support. So researchers have suggested that this could potentially help slow down aspects of bone loss. Well, what that then means is that your body might be trying to compensate, at least partially, for declining ovarian hormone production. And I personally find that really fascinating. Because it reminds, well, at least me, that our body is rarely passive. So it's constantly looking for solutions, constantly adapting, constantly trying to maintain a balance. And when we understand that, it becomes easier to move away from the idea that the body is betraying us. Instead, we can begin to see that it is a highly intelligent system responding to changing circumstances. And that shift in perspective can be incredibly powerful. Now, before I continue, I'd like you to think about something. How often do you actually speak to your body? Maybe not literally, but how often do you think thoughts about your body? For many women, especially during menopause, those thoughts become increasingly critical. Why can't I lose weight? Why do I look different? Why doesn't my body cooperate? But imagine speaking to a friend going through a major life transition. Would you speak to her the same way? Probably not. You'd likely offer patience and compassion and understanding. And perhaps it's worth extending some of that kindness to yourself as well. Because menopause is not a failure, it's a transition. And transitions require adaptation. So, when we're exploring all these surprising functions that body fat has in your body. And, in our culture, body fat's definitely not a positive thing. It's usually seen as a negative. But it is, in fact, really interesting that fat tissue is biologically active. That it communicates with, sorry about that, other parts of the body. It produces hormones and it signals molecules and it influences metabolism. And it even plays a role in immune function. And as we grow older, our immune systems naturally change as well. And this process is sometimes referred to as immune aging. So the immune system doesn't necessarily stop working, but it often becomes less effective and more prone to dysregulation. Scientists are still learning about the complex relationship between body fat and immune health. Now, this is where nuance becomes important. Excess abdominal fat, particularly visceral fat, stored deep around the organs, is associated with inflammation and metabolic problems. So more is not always better. However, that doesn't mean all body fat is harmful. The reality is far more complex. Body fat serves many functions in the body. And moderate energy reserves have been part of normal human physiology throughout history. It is one of the reasons I encourage women to move away from viewing body fat as the enemy. Instead, think of it as tissue that has jobs to do. The goal isn't necessarily to have as little body fat as possible. The goal is to support a healthy balance. Now, let's talk about one of the changes many women find particularly frustrating. Why does fat seem to move? You may have noticed that before menopause, fat tended to collect around the hips, thighs, and the buttocks. And then suddenly, seemingly overnight, your waistline starts changing. You haven't necessarily gained a huge amount of weight, yet your clothes fit differently. Your shape changes, and you wonder what on earth happened. This shift is largely influenced by changing hormone levels. Before menopause, estrogen encourages a more pear-shaped fat distribution. As estrogen declines, the body often begins storing more fat around the abdomen. This abdominal fat is more metabolically active than fat stored in the hips and thighs. In simple terms, it can be mobilized more quickly when energy is needed. Again, that doesn't mean we should celebrate increasing abdominal fat. Excess visceral fat can create health challenges, but understanding that there may be biological reasons behind these changes can help reduce the tendency to blame ourselves. Because many women assume they must be doing something wrong, and in reality, some of these shifts are simply part of the hormonal landscape of menopause. Now, let's discuss something else that often gets overlooked. Body fat also provides physical protection. It helps insulate the body, it helps maintain body temperature, and it cushions organs. It also provides a degree of protection against physical stress. And think again about our ancestors. They didn't have central heating. They didn't have insulated homes. They didn't have electric blankets and fleece-lined clothing. The body developed numerous protective mechanisms to survive far harsher environment. Many of these mechanisms still exist today. Our modern world has changed incredibly quickly, but our biology hasn't. And that brings us to an important point. While some menopausal changes may have evolved as adaptive responses, modern life often amplifies them. This is where many women run into difficulties. Imagine taking a body that evolved for movement, seasonal eating patterns, and occasionally food scarcity, and placing it into an environment where food is available 24/7. An environment where sitting has become normal. An environment filled with ultra-processed foods engineered to be difficult to stop eating. An environment where many people sleep too little and experience chronic stress. The body is trying to adapt to menopause, and at the same time it's trying to cope with modern life. That's really asking a lot. So many women today are dealing with poor sleep, high stress, long working hours, blood sugar instability, low protein intake, reduced muscle mass, lack of strength training, and all these factors can make menopausal weight gain worse. This is why I often encourage women to stop focusing solely on the calories and start focusing on nourishment, because menopause is not simply a weight problem. It's a whole body transition, and when we support the body properly, many aspects of health can improve, even if the scales don't immediately move. So let's talk about working with your body rather than fighting against it. One of the biggest priorities during menopause is preserving muscle mass. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. It helps regulate blood sugar. It supports balance and mobility. It protects independence as we age. Unfortunately, muscle loss tends to accelerate during and after menopause. This is one reason why many women find that the old advice of eating less and exercise more often backfires. If weight loss comes at the expense of muscle tissue, metabolic health can actually worsen over time. Instead, I encourage women to think about becoming stronger rather than to simply become lighter. Imagine being 75 years old. Which would serve you better, being 10 kilograms lighter or being strong enough to carry your shopping, climb stairs, travel independently, enjoy life? Strength matters. And one of the most important building blocks of strength is protein. Many women are simply not eating enough. Protein provides the amino acids needed to maintain and build muscle tissue. A traditional nutrient-dense approach naturally supports this. Foods such as eggs, meat, fish, shellfish, poultry, full-fat dairy products where tolerated, and also slow-cooked stews, bone broths. These foods provide not only protein, but also vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients that support overall health. Another important area is healthy traditional fats. For decades, many women were told to fear fat. Yet healthy fats help support satiety, hormone production, and nutrient absorption. Foods such as butter, ghee, extra virgin olive oil, egg yolks, oily fish, and naturally raised animal fats have nourished human populations for centuries, lots and lots of generations. Rather than fearing those, it may be more helpful to focus on food quality. Traditional diets around the world were rarely built around highly processed products. They were built around real food. Food that people could recognize. Food that their grandparents would recognize. Food prepared in kitchens rather than factories. So, the next area is blood sugar balance. Repeated spikes and crashes in blood sugar can contribute to increased hunger, cravings, and energy fluctuations. One of the simplest ways to support blood sugar balance is to build meals around protein, healthy fats, and nutrient-dense whole foods. So, many women notice that they feel fuller, more satisfied, and more energized when they prioritize these foods. And sleep, that definitely deserves special attention. Poor sleep affects appetite hormones. It affects blood sugar regulation. It affects stress hormones, and that also affects decision making. So in short, everything becomes harder when you're tired. You may have noticed. If menopause is affecting your sleep, making sleep support a priority may be one of the most powerful things that you can do for your overall health. The same is true for stress management. The body doesn't distinguish particularly well between a charging predator and an overflowing inbox. Chronic stress places ongoing demands on the body. Finding ways to reduce stress through walking, prayer, meditation, breathing practices, spending time in nature, or attending meaningful social activities so that you can have some connection, that can have really, really good benefits. And speaking of walking, never underestimate the power of walking. Walking is one of the most underrated forms of movement available. You don't need any expensive equipment, you don't need a gym membership, and you don't need perfect fitness. You can just start where you are. So a simple daily walk supports circulation, blood sugar regulation, and mental well-being and overall health. Sometimes the simplest habits are the most powerful. And as we begin to slowly close today's episode, I'd like to return to the question we asked at the beginning. What if your body is not working against you? What if many of the changes you're experiencing are part of your body's attempt to adapt to a completely new season in life? That doesn't mean we ignore our health, and it doesn't mean we stop caring for ourselves, and it certainly doesn't mean we give up on feeling our best, but it does invite us to replace criticism with curiosity, to replace frustration with understanding, to replace shame with compassion. Because menopause is not the end of health, it's not the end of vitality, it's not the end of strength, it's simply a transition, a new chapter. And like every new chapter, it requires new strategies, new understanding, and sometimes a new relationship with ourselves. So your body may not look exactly the way it did when you were 20 or 30 or so, but it continues to work tirelessly on your behalf every single day. And that alone deserves a little bit of gratitude, don't you think? So, if you enjoyed this episode, I have created a free digital download, and it's called Menopause and Weight Gain, as this episode is also called. It expands on a couple of the topics that I've talked about just now, and it gives some practical to read over if you want to do that later, so that you can remember a bit what we've talked about here. And I'll share the link in the description below so that you can click on it and download it. And if you'd like more content on traditional nutrition, gut health, menopause, pregnancy, holistic well-being, and living a healthier life naturally, I'd love to invite you to join my email list. I regularly share subscriber-only content, practical tips, resources, and things like that in my newsletter. And I don't share it anywhere else, it's just in my newsletter. So I'll share a link for that in the description as well if you want to sign up for that. And finally, if you found today's episode helpful, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with someone who may benefit from hearing this message. It really does help more people discover the podcast and allows me to continue creating content like this for you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate it. And until next time, please take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and remember, health is rarely built through perfection. It's built one step, one choice, one day at a time. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.